Shinichi was a weak and pathetic nerd with no riz and no aura. But that was until an alien parasite attacked his body and replaced his hand. And to make matters worse, alien parasites arrive on Earth and invade people's brains, turning them into lethal human-eating mutants. In young Shinichi's room, while he's sleeping, one of the parasites falls from the ceiling and tries to enter through the human's ear. But as he has headphones on, the little alien decides to enter through his nose. But he ends up waking up the boy, who manages to throw him away, thinking it's some normal insect. Shinichi gets up to try to crush it, but the alien flies and penetrates his arm. The boy then uses the phone cord as a tourniquet to try to stop the invader from entering. But his mother hears the noise and ends up taking the phone off his arm to try to see what's happening, thus allowing the parasite to enter. The next morning, Shinichi feels his arm rather strange, but decides to ignore it and go to school as normal. But during class, he's sure that something is really not right when his arm reaches out to pick up an eraser on the floor. And also during basketball class, he manages to throw an unbelievable shot. After class, Shinichi decides to do some research on the internet about hands moving by themselves. But while he's browsing the sites, an eye suddenly appears in his hand. Curious, the boy takes a knife, and while he gathers the courage to open a wound on himself, his hand turns into a weird and defective snake. But soon after, it takes on a slightly more friendly shape, if we can call it that. In this new form, a mouth appears on his hand and an eye appears on one of his fingers, in addition to the other 4 fingers transforming into the creature's arms and legs. Frightened, Shinichi asks the alien to give him back his right hand, but the creature reveals that it has devoured all of his cells in that area. Therefore, he will never have his member back. After staying up all night scared by his alien hand, Shinichi goes to school, where the creature in his right hand asks to be called Migi, literally right in Japanese. In high school, Migi asks Shinichi to take him to study at the library, as well as attend fencing and marksmanship classes. And in all these things, Migi manages to develop very quickly. At the same time, the other parasites that have also fallen to Earth begin to invade their hosts' bodies and eat their brains, taking control of their victims and using them to make their meals of human flesh. As Shinichi is heading home after class, Migi begins to feel another parasite nearby. And wanting to know what it would be like if it had invaded a brain, he forces the boy to get off the bus and guides him to a kind of butcher shop where the guy supposedly is. Upon arriving at the place, Shinichi finds the door locked. But Migi starts looking around and finds a new entrance that they use to access the place. Inside, Shinichi walks slowly until he encounters an extremely bizarre creature with the body of a human and a head shaped like a cauliflower. To make matters worse, this crazy creature is using its popcorn head to eat a person's leftovers. When he sees Shinichi, the creature assumes his fully human form, and sensing Migi's presence, believes the boy is also an alien and offers him an arm to eat. But quickly, the parasite realizes that Shinichi is still alive and that Migi only possessed his hand. As soon as the enemy realizes this, Migi begins to sense an aggressive intention coming from him and orders Shinichi to flee. But the boy is quickly cornered, forcing Migi to assume a battle stance to protect him. Knowing that if Shinichi loses his life, Migi will have the same fate, the butcher cuts off his own hand and says that Migi can stay there so they can both eat the boy's body. But he ends up taking too long to respond, and the man gives up on the partnership, launching an attack that gets parried by Migi at the last second. The butcher then begins a series of attacks with his tentacles, but Migi ends the fight quickly by turning one of the boy's fingers into a super sharp blade that beheads the other alien. However, their struggle ends up drawing the attention of people on the street who call the police. Shinichi then runs back to his house just before the cops enter the butcher shop. As soon as they start to do the forensics, the detectives discover that that place served as a hiding place for the butcher, who, in fact, was an alien who ate human flesh. But for them, there's still a question: who eliminated the butcher? At school, while the principal makes some announcements, Migi senses the presence of another parasite nearby and starts looking for him. But that search doesn't take long, as the headmaster announces a new substitute teacher named Tamiya Ryoko. And Migi immediately realizes she's another parasite. Ryoko starts walking to her room as she gets followed by Shinichi. Realizing that the boy is after her, the teacher says he shouldn't be afraid because the only thing she wants is to live like an ordinary human. Furthermore, she argues that if she wanted to eliminate him, Migi would have already sensed her intention. Ryoko then calls them to talk in a more private place and takes them to another location where she introduces two other parasites. The first of these is Shimada, a student just like Shinichi, and the other is Mr. A rather hostile and strange cop who doesn't want to reveal his real name. With everyone introduced, Ryoko says that they want to live normally with humans, and that's why they should help each other to stay away from the authorities. Lastly, Ryoko says that she performed a strange experiment on Mr. A, thus finding out that she can get pregnant. This means that she's generating a human being in her womb and wants to carry out more experiments to find out how this is possible, as well as wanting to find out what her purpose is in this world. Finding all this insane, Shinichi refuses to cooperate. But Ryoko responds by saying that if he won't help, he shouldn't try to get in the way in any way, as she's now at school and can eliminate all the students if he and Migi try to do something. As the trio of parasites leaves, Migi instantly tells Shinichi to watch out for Mr. A, as he sensed strong negative intent coming from him. After the meeting, Shinichi goes to his house and, knowing the dangers that humans are in, asks his mother not to leave the house. But the woman says he's paranoid and that he's been weird since the day of the incident with his arm, starting an argument that ends with Shinichi heading to school. After class, the boy is heading home when Migi senses Mr. A's presence and warns the boy once more about his intentions. But as soon as he finishes talking, the alien policeman appears in front of them, and Migi asks him to try to run because his enemy has great combat skill. After some time on the run, Shinichi gets tired, and Migi takes control and confronts Mr. A as to why they're being followed. The man then says that he saw the cuts on the butcher's body at the police station and that he knows they were the ones who eliminated him. That is, from Mr. A's point of view, they're dangerous and must be eliminated. After saying that, the monster shows its true form, and Migi enters combat mode. As they exchange blows, Shinichi slowly advances towards his opponent until he gets close enough to ram an iron bar through his chest that drains all of Mr. A's blood. Turns out he got too confident that a human wouldn't attack him and didn't protect his body properly. Upon seeing this scene, Shinichi is extremely disgusted and runs home. But he committed the same cliché as always. He did not confirm the death of the enemy. It turns out that while he's still alive, Mr. A has some time to invade the body of anyone who gets close. However, to Shinichi's misfortune, his mother was returning from work and hearing the man dying, she decides to help. But she ends up being possessed as soon as she gets close to Mr. A. In bed, Migi notices a parasite approaching and wakes Shinichi up to get ready. The boy then takes a knife and waits while Migi counts the distance between them and the parasite until finally the alien stops at the door. Seeing that the approaching parasite was actually his mother, Shinichi refuses to believe that she was possessed and fights with Migi for trying to make him attack. But while the two are arguing, Mr. A reveals that he actually possessed her body. In a state of denial, Shinichi says he loves her and starts to apologize for the argument they had earlier. But as soon as he finishes whining, the parasite uses the woman's body to pierce the boy's heart and leaves. Migi leaves his hand and enters the hole in the boy's chest, placing his cells to replace all the damaged tissue. After hours of unconsciousness, Shinichi finally gets up from the pool of blood and walks to the bathroom to look at the wound in the mirror, which is now fully closed. After these events, Shinichi stopped attending school, and because of that, Sadami, a very close friend, decides to visit him to understand what's happening. But the boy ignores her and runs to Ryoko's room. Upon seeing the boy, the woman immediately talks about the policeman's body found, accusing them of eliminating Mr. A. But Migi tells her about everything that happened and asks if she knows where he is. But Ryoko refuses and says he just disappeared. Migi then asks why she introduced them if she knew Mr. A could be a problem. And Ryoko replies that it was just another one of her experiments. Furious that his mother lost her life to an experiment, Shinichi pulls out a knife and threatens to attack her. But Ryoko coldly gets up and goes partially into combat mode. But she gives up on eliminating them when she senses that something in Shinichi has changed, deciding just to walk away and watch how he develops. Still angry, the boy throws his knife towards her. But Ryoko manages to stop the weapon with the strands of her hair and throws it back, almost hitting his face. Once at his house, Shinichi vows to avenge his mother and starts walking around the city looking for Mr. A. But as they're leaving the subway station, Migi says he feels the presence of several parasites nearby. Following the instructions of the alien in his right hand, Shinichi arrives in the middle of a crowd that's at a political rally. Looking at the mayoral candidate and his companions, Migi immediately realizes that they're the aliens, a complete political party made up of extraterrestrial parasites. At home, Shinichi and Migi start talking about the parasites' plan to take control of the state until the detective in charge of the investigation at the butcher shop pays a visit to talk about the body of the policeman they found nearby. But for some reason, rather suspiciously, they withdraw as soon as the boy says he doesn't know anything. After some time, Shinichi finally goes back to school. And while he's getting the material from the locker, Sadami appears and invites him to dinner. But before he even responds, Shimada appears, and Satomi introduces him as a new student. That is, another one of the aliens is at school trying to live a normal life. Seeing him, Shinichi immediately asks what he's doing there and asks him to leave. But not understanding what's happening, Sadami scolds Shinichi and forces them to greet each other. As they shake hands, Shimada taunts Shinichi, who starts using all of his strength and nearly crushes the parasite's hand. As soon as their grimace dispute ends, Shimada goes to Ryoko's room and tells her about the superhuman strength that Shinichi has developed. That is, everything was just a test to see the effects that Migi's cells are having on the boy. At his house, Shinichi prepares to go in search of Mr. A once again. But Migi stops him, saying that after he used his cells to save him, he can't wake up after he falls asleep. That is, if Migi sleeps in the midst of battle, it will be the end of the boy. At the headquarters, Ryoko fights with the other parasites, saying that they're attracting too much attention by bringing several bodies to serve as a meal and that they'll soon be discovered. But one of them simply ignores it and says that humans have found a way to identify them. It turns out that when one of them has their hair pulled out, the strand instantly curls up, meaning it's only a matter of time before they're discovered. After class, Satomi renews the invitation to dinner, and with no one to disturb, the boy accepts. So they go to a market to buy the ingredients, and as they're leaving the store, Shinichi hears the sound of a car. A small puppy was run over. Shinichi delivers the groceries to Satomi and crosses in front of the cars to get the dog. But as soon as he realizes he's gone, the boy throws his body in the trash in an extremely cold way. Upon seeing what Shinichi has done, Satomi is outraged and asks why he's doing this, to which the boy replies that now that the dog is no longer alive, it's just a bunch of useless meat. Noticing the coldness of the boy she loves, Satomi asks what happened to him and leaves completely disappointed. Alone, Shinichi starts talking to Migi, who says that those are words he would say. That is, because of the transplanted cells, Shinichi is becoming more and more like an alien, both in personality and physical strength. At school, the principal realizes that Ryoko is pregnant and for some stupid reason decides to fire her. After losing her job, she decides to return to the real Ryoko's parents' house. But the mother quickly realizes that this is not her daughter and starts screaming to call the police, forcing the alien to assume its true form and pierce the heart of the hostess, cutting off the mother's head soon after. After her argument with Shinichi, Satomi goes to the painting class where the girls are using Shimada as a model. But out of nowhere, one of the students pulls a hair out of him, which instantly starts to tangle. Seeing this, the girls are terrified and gather in a corner of the room, while Shimada calmly counts the amount of victims he'll have to do. After finishing his count, the boy assumes his true form and says he'll eliminate them quickly so they don't feel pain. But Satomi throws a vial of acid that catches the parasite's face, burning its entire face and corroding its insides. Taking advantage of the fact that he's writhing in pain, the students get up to run. But while he's struggling, Shimada ends up hitting one of the girls who has her body split in half right in Satomi's arms. At that moment, Migi senses Shimada's mortal instinct and Shinichi hears the girls scream. And already imagining what's happening, he starts to run towards them. But he ends up arriving too late, and all his colleagues have already been brutally eliminated. Upon seeing his friends' bodies, Shinichi goes into a state of complete shock as Migi tries to get him to focus. Less flustered, Shinichi begins to be filled with hatred and starts looking for Shimada. While Ryoko prepares some chemical compound in her laboratory on the top floor, Shimada finds Satomi hiding in one of the closets and decides to knock her down. After getting up, the girl even tries to run but gets hit in the leg by one of Shimada's tentacles. At that moment, Shinichi finally finds them and takes down the parasite, putting himself between him and Satomi. After getting up, Shimada starts attacking Shinichi and manages to sever his hand, separating him from Migi. However, they manage to get back together quite easily as Satomi watches everything, and Shimada is left reeling from the acid damage. At that moment, Ryoko appears behind Shimada and says that he's getting in the way of her goals while throwing a kind of Molotov in his direction. Sensing the danger, Shinichi picks up Satomi in his arms and jumps off the top floor and lands softly on the ground as the building explodes behind him. After all the chaos, the police officers arrive at the scene and run straight to the top floor where they find Shimada still alive. And despite being trained, they're all eliminated with extreme ease. Outside, Migi communicates to Shinichi that Shimada is still alive and that he's heading to the roof to avenge his friends. The boy goes to the top of the other building and cuts a steel pipe. Migi then transforms into a bow and Shinichi uses the iron bar as an arrow to pierce Shimada's heart from an unbelievable distance, just like he saw in target shooting classes. After Shinichi eliminates his enemy, Ryoko appears behind him and tells him that she'll disappear to experience motherhood. But before going, she gives him the address where Mr. A is hiding. Upon arriving at the place, Shinichi is seen by the Cursed One and both begin to walk to a further place to finally fight. But along the way, Migi says he's getting sleepy and that he'll be sleeping soon. He then at least transforms into a blade for Shinichi to use in battle and then ends up falling asleep. Even alone, the boy manages to do well and defend himself from most of the blows. But when Mr. A was about to eliminate him, his mother takes control of half of the body and deflects the tentacle. Knowing that even then his mother can't save herself anymore, Shinichi goes up and ends the fight by ripping off Mr. A's head, finally avenging his mother and letting her go in peace. After the battle, Shinichi goes to visit Satomi in the hospital, and while she's unconscious, the boy promises that he'll exterminate all the parasites so that no one else suffers like she did because of the aliens. However, while he's talking to Migi, a photographer takes several pictures of the two of them together, thus exposing that he has some connection with the aliens. At the same time, all the candidates of the alien party are elected, including the mayor. That is, they're now part of the government and have full power over human laws. With that, Gato, the leader of the aliens, finally understood why they're there: to exterminate the human race so that the planet can become healthier for everyone. After going through a lot of lows on the human side, Detective Hirama discovered that a psychopath named Uragami apparently can identify the people who are hosts of the parasite, and he decides to use it to analyze all the main suspects at the police station one by one. The people of interest are released when Uragami says they're only human. However, as soon as Shinichi enters the room, the man immediately realizes that he's not fully human. But for some reason, he tells the police that he's okay, and the boy is released. As Shinichi is heading home, Migi begins to sense the presence of a parasite nearby and guides him to the place where they come across another one of the parasites savoring human flesh. With Shinichi more experienced, Migi just needs to distract the alien while the boy advances and manages to eliminate him by piercing his heart with just his hand, leaving even Migi himself impressed. As soon as they finish the quick fight, Shinichi goes to the body that the parasite was eating to regret not having arrived sooner. However, while doing so, he hears a strange sound nearby and starts looking, but can't find anything suspicious. That photographer is still after him. At the town hall, Mayor Hirokawa learns that another one of his own has been eliminated by Shinichi and thinks about getting revenge. But Ryoko insists on doing nothing and just waits until the boy calms down and stops attacking them. However, the other aliens disagree and ask Goto to decide. But as he's not present, they all follow Ryoko's orders and just leave him alone. On the street, a strange parasite named Miki is doing his morning run until he finds a Yakuza office and starts laughing. Seeing this, one of the mobsters asks what he's laughing about. But Miki doesn't even bother to answer and simply sinks the man's skull into the ground. And to complete his training, Miki calmly enters the office and eliminates all 8 mobsters. At a restaurant not far from there, Ryoko meets the photographer Kuramori, who wants to reveal Shinichi's photos to the police so that they can capture him and thus get the location of the others. However, as she knows that this will lead straight to her, Ryoko asks the photographer to wait a little longer, and she uses the fact that Shinichi is her former student as an excuse, saying that she doesn't want to give him up. After meeting Ryoko, Kuramori goes to the school to continue spying on the boy, but Shinichi notices his presence and lures him to a farther place to corner him. With Kuramori in his possession, Shinichi takes him home to talk and discovers that Ryoko was the one who told the photographer that he's a parasite. To reciprocate in kind, Shinichi says that the prefecture has become the parasite's stronghold and that Ryoko is one of the leaders, as well as being the smartest among them all. Finally, Shinichi warns Kuramori to forget everything he knows and go about his normal life before he's eliminated by one of the parasites. But the first thing he does is go to the city hall to record an interview with the mayor and put a hidden recorder to spy on him. But as soon as he leaves, one of the parasites finds the object, and Hirokawa finally decides to override the orders of Ryoko and eliminate both the photographer and Shinichi and Migi. At school, Shinichi finishes his classes and starts walking back home together with Satomi, but while they're talking, Migi feels that they're being followed by 5 enemies at once. To prevent Satomi from getting hurt, Shinichi starts to walk away. But after some time running away, he's finally found by Miki. But weren't they 5 parasites? Well, each of this guy's limbs is a different parasite. That is, he's an alien in each of his arms and each of his legs. As they're running away from the enemy, Migi notices that his blows are quite uncoordinated and decides to use this to his advantage. He then stretches up a tree to surprise him from behind and manages to rip off Miki's head with a single blow. After defeating the enemy, Shinichi and Migi prepare to pierce his heart to eliminate him once and for all. However, at that moment, a group of humans begins to approach, and they have to flee to avoid being seen, a mistake they will surely regret. With its head vacant, the parasite that's in the right arm takes control of the body, revealing to be Goto himself. It turns out that this overpowered being is a kind of multi-parasite entity, but each of the parasites can take control of the body by modifying the voice and even the personality. Back in control of his body, Goto orders Miki to go back to his right arm, and the crazy head comes walking with its demonic paws until it reaches the body. At the same time, Kuramori is at home talking to his daughter when he realizes that he has to leave to go to the market and spend some time there. But when he returns, he notices that some vehicles are around his building. Fearing for his daughter, the man starts to run desperate, and when he arrives, he discovers that what he feared most happened. His only daughter was eliminated by the parasites. After the crime, Detective Hirama begins to interrogate Kuramori, thinking he has some connection with the parasites. But the photographer is determined to take revenge on his own and takes advantage of the moment he's alone to escape the police station. Upon learning of what happened to Kuramori's daughter, Ryoko goes to the prefecture and confronts Hirokawa for disobeying her orders. And in addition to failing to eliminate the targets, he also took the life of an innocent child. Ryoko then goes to her room and starts playing with her son, letting motherhood blossom inside her. But as soon as she leaves the room, she realizes that she's being chased by some parasites and lures them to the parking lot. As soon as they get close enough, the trio of aliens order Ryoko to stop and tell her that they were sent by Hirakawa to eliminate her. But the woman says that only 3 would never be able to destroy her, and so she reveals a part of her face that's missing. At that moment, 3 pieces of parasites appear, piercing the enemy's hearts and eliminating the trio at once. These bizarre cartilages throw themselves in Ryoko's face and transform into the missing parts of her face. After getting rid of the trio, Ryoko goes back to her son's room. But the only thing she finds in the crib is a note from Kuromori saying that he now has the child. At the police station, Detective Hirama calls Kuromori, trying to convince him to give his location so he can help him in his revenge, but the photographer refuses, saying he'll do it alone. After ending the call, Kuromori passes his location to Ryoko, who, before going to him, decides to call Shinichi for help. At the same time, the Japanese task force somehow manages to discover that the parasites are in the prefecture building and go with all their men there. As soon as they arrive at the place, the officers say that there's a sniper on top of the building and start organizing people to evacuate the place. But it's all an excuse to make everyone go through a type of X-ray that can distinguish the humans from the aliens. As soon as they detect a parasite, the police take it out of line and corner it between some buses where, one by one, they're executed. Realizing that there's no way to escape, the aliens try to escape somewhere else so they don't go through the X-ray. But the police start a real hunt when they bring Uragami to serve as a portable scanner, analyzing everyone in the place. With Uragami's help, the police eliminate all the parasites in the prefecture until they finally find Hirakawa, who tries to convince the police that the parasites are necessary to maintain population control. But the police don't waste a second thinking and carry out hundreds of shots at him. But it was a mistake. Despite being on the side of the parasites, Hirakawa was a human. After the cops eliminate the mayor, Goto appears in the room, and as soon as Uragami confirms he's not a human, the cops start shooting. Goto then uses the parasite in his left hand, forming a kind of shield that stops all projectiles as if they were simple paper balls. Realizing that the power level of this parasite is totally different from anything he's ever seen, Uragami starts to run away from the place unnoticed, which ends up saving him as all the officers are eliminated with extreme ease. When she arrives at the meeting point, Ryoko explains that she wasn't the one who ordered the elimination of Kuromori's daughter, but he ignores her and insists on causing her the same pain he's feeling. At that moment, Shinichi finally arrives at the place and tries to convince the photographer to give up, but he can't either. As Ryoko approaches Kuromori, Detective Hirama manages to track the photographer's location and finally arrives at the scene. Seeing the men, Kuromori tries to throw the boy from a considerable height, which ends up forcing Ryoko to use her tentacles to pierce the heart of the photographer, who falls lifeless. With that, she finally manages to retrieve her son, but she reveals that she's a parasite in front of everyone. Upon realizing that the woman is an alien, Detective Hirama and his men draw their weapons and tell her not to move. But Ryoko disobeys and starts walking calmly towards Shinichi, with her son finally in her arms. As the orders were ignored, Detective Hirama shoots Ryoko right in the forehead, but she spits out the projectile like it was nothing and regenerates from the wound with her healing factor. Seeing that the woman continues advancing, the other officers also start shooting. But instead of attacking them, Ryoko uses her hair to protect her son and calmly walks towards Shinichi while being hit by dozens of bullets. Seeing this whole scene, Shinichi yells for the police to stop shooting, saying that the boy in her lap is a human. And upon hearing this, Detective Hirama makes his men cease fire. Completely bloodied, Ryoko says that this is goodbye and that she learned a lot from humans. She then ends her speech by saying that she would like to have a mother and child life together with the boy. But as that won't be possible, she gives little Taki to Shinichi to raise him as a happy, healthy human child. Finally, Ryoko says that she was able to perform her greatest experiment, that of being a mother. And sensing that her goal has been completed, she falls to the ground already lifeless, with her body rotting in seconds. Shinichi then remembers his mother, who was also protecting her son, and starts to cry. At that moment, Satomi finally arrives, and both hug with Taki on their lap. After everyone recovers, a policewoman takes little Taki while Detective Hirama calls Shinichi to testify. But at that time, one of the officers receives the report about the operation at the town hall and informs the detective that the entire task force has been decimated by Goto. As soon as they arrive at the town hall, the men are greeted by the brutal parasite that hurls a human head in their direction as if it were nothing. Migi then tells Shinichi that this is the man they defeated the night before, but now much stronger, and he tells him to run away because he's scared. The boy then starts to run until he reaches the parking lot where Migi unlocks a car and they run away. At that moment, Goto jumps from the top of the building, and Hirama starts shooting at him. But the villain manages to stop all the bullets and throws them back at the detective, who loses his life instantly. Seeing what Goto is capable of, the police simply give up on eliminating him and make way for him to go after Shinichi. Goto then goes to the parking lot and steals a sports bike to chase his targets. In the car, Migi senses Goto approaching until he realizes that the distance between them is 0 meters. At that moment, Goto falls along with the bike on the roof of the car. And while Migi drives, Shinichi struggles to survive. But with all this absurd movement, they end up losing control of the car and have an accident that would be fatal if Migi didn't pull them back to the track. From above, Shinichi observes the burning car, believing that Goto is gone. But Migi responds, saying that he's still alive and that it'll be much harder than that. Goto then comes out of the wreckage and starts to regenerate, while Shinichi runs through the middle of the forest and prepares a kind of wooden spear to defend himself. Migi then hatches a plan and separates himself from Shinichi's body. As Goto arrives at the trap's location, Migi tries to attack him from behind, but his attack is easily repelled by the parasite that turns around, giving Shinichi the opening to come out from behind the tree to stab him with his powerful wooden spear. But despite being distracted, the boss still manages to stop the boy's blow. Taking advantage of Goto's distraction, Migi performs an attack that almost manages to knock him out. But it's not enough to make a deep cut, and he insists on attacking to try and finish him off while the other 4 parasites parry all the blows, giving time for Goto to put his head back in place. As his plan failed, Migi realizes he has no chance against him and orders Shinichi to flee. But the boy refuses to abandon him and just watches as Migi has his limbs ripped off one by one and is brutally defeated. With his main target unable to fight, Goto turns to eliminate Shinichi, but Migi uses the rest of his strength to distract him, giving the gap the boy needs to escape. But Goto finishes him right away. Completely lost, Shinichi starts running through the forest in the middle of the rain until he arrives in the abandoned sector of a nuclear power plant and finally finds shelter. Exhausted, Shinichi lies down and begins to hyperventilate until he receives a call from Satomi, who finds him unconscious. While he's passed out, Satomi starts to bandage him up. In the morning, the young couple wake up and Shinichi notices that an eye has appeared in what's left of his arm, meaning Migi's cells are still inside him. But despite everything, this is bad news because the parasites manage to locate each other. That is, Goto knows where he is and it's a matter of time until they find him. At the power plant's access gate, an employee sees Goto entering and tries to stop him. But the man doesn't even have a chance to say anything and has his head ripped off by the parasite's tentacles. Seeing this, Shinichi says goodbye to Satomi and decides to face the boss once and for all. The boy then reveals his location and lures Goto to the nuclear waste sector, where he tries to escape by hanging onto a gigantic claw that starts to move away. But Goto uses his powers to transform his legs into the paws of an impala and jumps to a gigantic height, falling right on top of the claw. Even with his target practically defenseless and without an arm, Goto spares no effort to eliminate him and makes several attacks against him, but he ends up cutting the claw cables by accident. On the ground, Shinichi sees a piece of rebar in the middle of the trash, and in a last effort, he dodges the blows, picks up the object, and slides in the greatest Neo-Matrix style until he finally reaches Goto and pierces his chest with the rebar. But despite all his effort, Shinichi ended up missing the boss's heart, and so he didn't suffer any considerable damage. To fight back, Goto launches an attack against Shinichi. But as soon as his tentacle touches the boy's severed limb, they start to merge until a part of the parasite stays with Goto and another part takes the form of Migi in the boy's arm. Finally, back in action, the parasite says that it kept a part of its cells inside Goto himself and that all this time it has been damaging his nervous system. Also, Migi says that the rebar the boy used was filled with radioactive waste, causing Goto's body to go out of control and melt until he becomes an extremely grotesque humanoid creature and finally explodes. Goto is so powerful that even with its body destroyed, its heart is still beating, and the parasite in its head is summoning the rest of its cells to rebuild itself. To end his agony once and for all, Shinichi slowly walks over to him and throws him into the flames of the garbage incinerator, making his victory over the most powerful parasite official. Sometime after the big final battle, Migi tells that the nuclear waste has also affected his molecular structure and that he'll need to sleep until he restores all his cellular health, which can take years or even decades. Finally, Migi explains that with this, Shinichi will finally have his right hand back, and he says goodbye to his best friend, not knowing if they'll ever talk again. About a year after saying goodbye to Migi, Shinichi and Satomi go to visit little Taki, who isn't even that little anymore. After the visit, the couple goes for a walk and Satomi asks Shinichi to go to a store to buy ice cream. But Uragami, who was watching them, takes the opportunity to kidnap the girl and take her hostage. Once she gets to where Satomi is supposed to be, Shinichi starts looking around and sees her being taken away by the lunatic. Knowing that Shinichi is coming after him, Uragami takes Satomi to the top of a building where he coldly cuts a man's neck. When Shinichi arrives on the terrace, Uragami tells him that since the day he saw him at the police station with Detective Hirama, he has been obsessed with finding out what a real monster thinks of him. Despite the absurd psychopathy, Shinichi says that Uragami is just a normal person and tries to reassure him. But Satomi interferes by calling him an imbecile and saying that she feels sorry for a monster like him. Upon being called a monster, Uragami is filled with rage and starts approaching the edge slowly until he throws the girl from above. At that moment, Shinichi starts running towards the two, knocks out Uragami with a punch, and tries to grab Satomi's hand, but he sees her slipping from his fingers and falling off the building. Feeling guilty about the girl's end, Shinichi begins to remember everything that happened and regrets having lost everyone he loved. Then a quick flashback goes through his head, but Migi interrupts, saying to pull Satomi before she ends up slipping for good. Migi woke up for a second just to save the girl and went back to sleep. Safe and sound, the young couple lie down on the terrace, and Shinichi tells the girl that after he threw the dog in the trash, he regretted what he had done and buried him under a tree. End.